Hey everyone, I'm Hayes, this is Almond Brownies, and this video is starting with some violence as I smash my wolf sculpt off the wolf head and replace it with a polyurethane casting from the previous video. This is the sculpting of Wolf's lamb mask for my Kindred cosplay. If that makes sense to you, it's because Kindred is made of two characters, wolf and lamb, and they both wear masks representing the other animal. So you have wolf in a lamb mask and lamb in a wolf mask, and even after seeing their character design and studying their character design for ages whilst planning this costume out, I didn't actually realise that until I read their lore. So, you know, maybe it's not that obvious. But you can see here, we're starting off by building out the very basic foundations of the mask that we're going to be sculpting all the details onto later. I'm mostly using fingers, water, a knife and a rake tool, though I end up using the knife as a rake tool quite often to get some nice smooth surfaces and some nice sharp corners. And that's all slowly built up. However, as we go on, you can see me trying to measure out where the eyes will fit by comparing it to one of the little rings of NeoPixel LEDs that I'll be using to actually backlight the eyes, and I'm using that sort of putting an impression into the face, into the mask, so I can make sure that the eyes are big enough for the lights to go behind them. But as I'm doing this, I realised that the mask isn't actually wide enough. It changes the whole overall footprint of the mask and doesn't really make it look mask, and doesn't make it really look correct. And seeing the eyes in there really brought that home. So I actually spend a little time fleshing out the back of the mask and make it a little bit more like the concept art rather than the actual in-game model is a lot more rounded, and I kind of don't like that. So a lot of it is down to preference. This sculpt is an odd one because rather than sculpting it on a face, I am sculpting this on my wolf head, because this is a mask going to be worn by my wolf mask over the top of all the wolf fur, which is a kind of maskception event, but you know, it's all about adding extra details, hence why this is on effectively a fursuit head without any fur, because it's going to go on this head to be worn by the person eventually, just like I said in the last video. We carry on and we get to the point where I actually put the eyes back in. Whilst redoing the eyes and redoing the back half of the mask, I have to then reblend the lamb ears in, which turns out they were the entirely wrong shape. We're on the second day by now, so that shows you sort of coming back the day after really helps in making sure the mask is as accurate as possible, because you get to come back to it with a set of fresh eyes. And by the way, the amount of lamb masks in the background are there because that's what happens when you know your jungler is about to feed. And you know your jungler is about to feed because I'm playing them. Ta-da! Oh god. Now we've cut the eyes out, so we're confident where the eyes are. We actually then can start the details. And the two most important details to have gotten correct are the ones which affect the outline of the mask, and therefore, in theory, still the foundations, which are the two cracks and two breaks just below the eyes on either side, because there's a different type of one on both sides. On our left, I have to build it out a little bit down, and on our right, I just take a chunk out of it. And then it's a case of, just like my last mask, and in fact, a lot of my masks, is imparting the detail by taking big, broad strokes out with my little, sort of tiny little spoon gougey tool. And that's just a lot of looking at the reference image, inventing a lot of details where you'd expect it to be, making sure that you've got the central forehead marking, so everything that is relative to that goes in. So you put that in the correct place first, and then all the other markings are effectively relative to it. So I actually started with a couple of the markings around the eyes, because I had the eyes where I wanted them, and at the base of the horns. And then from there, figured out where I wanted the forehead marking to be, put the forehead marking in, and then linked them all up. And then once you're happy with all of that, it's then a case of just going over them with a sponge, with some water, and slowly working them in, getting the texture correct. I went over each one of these lines on it 4 times over the course of 2 nights of sculpting, and I did this all on stream, so there are people who can verify that it happened. And that is a crazy amount of time and effort to put into a prop just to make it look slightly better than it could do. But I think it is entirely worth it, and actually goes to show on my lamb mask, and this one it will go to show as well, because when you look at it closely, when you come to paint it, you will thank yourself for putting that much detail in it. They become a joy to paint because there's so much detail that you get to bring out with your paint job and get a nice wooden effect. So future you will thank you for putting as much time into your sculpting phase as possible, into your detailing phase, because it goes foundations, anatomy or outline, then details, and then texturing. And the details and the texturing are the bits that take the longest, whereas the most important is kind of the outline and the foundations to get the actual overall shape right. Because if the overall shape isn't correct, no matter how detailed you make it, it's still going to look wonky from a distance. And don't be afraid to go back and change anything as you go. In fact, with this mask, I ended up cutting underneath the eyes a couple of times, cutting it back just to make sure that they were flat and straight like the reference image, and I actually opened the eyes up a fair bit as I went along. So they are significantly bigger than the LED rings that are going to go in them, but it makes more sense this way. And there is the finished sculpt. It's amazing. I love it. I am very, very proud of it. If you found any of this interesting so far, do make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and also, if you have any friends who are doing Kindred costumes, make sure to share this with them, so hopefully they'll get inspired. So, now to show you, quite quickly, the mold making process at the end of this video, rather than making an entire video of it on its own, because you've seen this all before. Now, just like before, I take this foam board, which is a fantastic thing to make mold walls out of, as it turns out, so long as you apply mold release agent, otherwise the silicone will stick to it. But mold release agent is something you should be applying anyway to make sure that the whole thing comes off nicely and it's easy to clean afterwards. Links will all be below for the materials if you are interested, but if you have any additional questions, do feel free to ask. Now, before I make the actual plaster mother mold for this, you can see I actually clean off the edges with a sharp knife so there's no loose silicone around, which will get stuck into the plaster mother mold, and the plaster mother mold just goes over the top to make sure the silicone can keep its own shape. And then the whole thing just wrenched off bodily from the sculpt. The sculpt does not survive very well. It might look okay in the picture, but if you look at it closely, it's had big chunks taken off. And now we actually go to my live stream, because not only did I do most of the sculpting on stream, I actually ended up doing my very first casting of the mask on stream, just so everybody could be there and be witness to it, just like I did with my Kindred mask. So it was 3 layers worth of rotocast resin going over it, and kind of just like my Kindred mask, when I pulled it out, the very first casting came out, it snapped in half. But I have a plan. I have a plan for that snap in half. This just comes down to my being impatient and wanting to get the mask out there, and also it was the first time I was using this mold, which meant as it was coming out I had to cut the mold, put some extra mold release cuts in there. You can see me going over with a really sharp knife, putting the zigzag cuts just to make sure I could get the horns out, and I hadn't done that properly beforehand, which actually meant the mask caught in it. So, lessons learned. But it left us with a fantastic finished mold, and here you can see this is a finished one which I didn't actually have to glue back together from a later casting that I left to set overnight, and sometime soon you will see the finished article. I hope this was a interesting and engaging video for all of you. If you're interested and enthusiastic about seeing where this costume goes, do be sure to hit like, let me know you're interested, chuck me some comments, subscribe to the channel to keep up to date, and I'll see you soon. Bye!